If not, we're going to handle this ourselves while we continue to build Cryptozoo, and I'll see you in court.
Part 6 is the more he says and the more he continues to spread this misinformation that this was any sort of con or scam, the more I have for the lawsuit that I am filing. The defamation lawsuit. That is happening because this is wrong. This is fucking wrong.
Well, he has gone and done it. Logan Paul has gone and filed a defamation lawsuit against Coffeezilla for statements that Coffeezilla allegedly made about Cryptozoo, calling it Logan Paul's scam. Now, surprisingly, the lawsuit isn't actually over Coffeezilla's original 3-part series from December 2022/January 2023 zone. Rather, it's for statements Coffeezilla allegedly made like 6 months to a year after that. And now, I said a year and a half ago that filing a defamation lawsuit over this whole thing would be a terrible idea, and I still stand by that statement. And while Logan Paul does make some allegations in his complaint that could cause some trouble for Coffeezilla, my overall take on this lawsuit is that it's not likely to be successful. In this video, I'm going to explain why that is and why overall I see this as just a bad idea for Logan Paul to pursue. I dug way too deep into this video to give you an in-depth analysis, so buckle up, it's going to be a bit of a long one. Let's get into it. Okay, so just in case you are unfamiliar with this whole controversy, let me first give you some background to ensure that we're all on the same page here. But before I do that, I have to thank this video's sponsor. This video is sponsored by iFlyTech, and specifically iFlyTech's nifty little device called their Smart Recorder. So let's open this thing up here. So you can see this is the box that it comes in. And when you open it up, it is right here. This is an AI-powered device that offers you a fully offline recorder and real-time transcriber, so you can use it without Wi-Fi or data. As a default, it comes with 5 language packages: English, Russian, Japanese, Korean, and Chinese, both Cantonese and Mandarin. And if you want more languages, the user guide gives you instructions for how to download one of their other supported languages. iFlyTech supports up to 60 different languages, covering a whole 200 countries and regions worldwide. On top of that, this device has a guaranteed secure data transfer and can hold up to 32 gigabytes of storage on it. It says it's something like 175 hours of recording. And while you're recording all that audio, you also get 7 hours of nonstop recording for each charge. That's not that bad. And when you turn it on, it allows you to manipulate the device with a touch screen or with one of these little buttons down here. So as you can see, let's see which way, there we go. It allows you to go through all kinds of different things here. So, isn't that nifty? And you can also, let's see. Okay. Nice. I will say, I like this device for when I'm having a thought about something, maybe a video idea, but I don't quite know how to get started or where to go with exactly what I want to say. And so this is great because I can just start talking to it, and that will help me sort of formulate my thoughts and put those thoughts together into something that is maybe a cogent video idea. And one of the coolest parts about this device here is that the AI is actually really good at transcribing in real time. So even if I put the device a little bit further away from me while recording, it will get a good transcription. For example, as I'm recording right now, I am actually transcribing this in the moment. And let's see if I can put this up here so that you can actually see it. And look at that. It's transcribing in real time. Not too shabby. So if, for example, there is some kind of a need to track what if any's in another future trial to come, I just might start using this device if it means that I can get a transcript faster than the YouTube plugins that I was using before. So if you're interested in getting one of these nifty little devices for yourself, check out the link in the description below and in the pinned comment. And thanks again to iFlyTech for sponsoring this video. Okay, now with that said, let's get to the rest of the video. Logan Paul is a massive YouTuber who's been around since the days of like the Vine app, when he basically was a small child with his brother Jake. Over the years though, Logan has found himself embroiled in a number of massive controversies. The first big one was when he went with a group to Japan to film for some YouTube content. On that trip, they went to a forest which was known in Japan as a place where people would go to specifically end their own lives. And so Logan and a group of people went there to film some content, and in probably one of the worst lapses of judgment in internet history, decided to actually show one of these people in the video. Just absolutely gross, disgusting, horrible, all of the worst things. And this wasn't even like a live stream where something happens and you just can't edit it out. This was a pre-recorded video, which was filmed, edited, reviewed, and released. And so with that came multiple decisions confirming that they wanted to show this. Anyway, for all the best reasons, Logan was essentially canceled from YouTube for a while and came out with a series of apologies on YouTube and sort of petered out for a while. After that, he slowly started to come back and he had his own podcast and he sort of rebuilt what he wanted to do on social media, I suppose. Well, then came cryptocurrencies, and along with it, social media and celebrity influencers getting involved in alleged pump and dump schemes. And Logan Paul was alleged to have engaged in a similar pump and dump scheme with the cryptocurrency meme coin known as Doink. Logan had promoted it on social media to his followers, and it ultimately crashed to a valuation of basically zero. And when that happened, he apparently distanced himself from it. Now, Logan claims that this was not a pump and dump scheme and even makes this claim in the complaint. But suspicion around his activities with Doink have been well reported to include by more mainstream media outlets, not just on social media. And what's more, he apparently admitted later to the New York Times that when he was promoting Doink, he failed to disclose the fact that he had actually helped to create the project with his then roommate, Jake Burrito. And the detail about Doink is important because there does appear to be, at the very least, an appearance of a through line between Doink and Cryptozoo. Cryptozoo was Logan Paul's cryptocurrency NFT project that came out pretty much on the heels of Doink. Here is Logan's description of the project.
Cryptozoo is a blockchain project that I created about a year and a half ago. Yeah, maybe I should give some context to what the game is. So you buy these eggs on the blockchain and you can hatch them into what are called base animals. I think there were like 14 or 15 of them. And then you can breed your base animals with each other to create fun-looking viral hybrid offspring that have a rarity scale. If you hatch a rare animal and you breed it with another rare animal, and it yields a rare hybrid animal, that animal then yields and collects a token the longer you hold it. Then when you release it into the wild, you accrue your yield. Does that make sense? That was the concept.
Got it.
So basically, whatever that means. This is an NFT game that he was vigorously marketing on YouTube and elsewhere on social media. This was apparently his project, and he hired a team of people to help make this supposed dream a reality. Unfortunately, though, it never became a reality, despite the fact that tons of people invested their hard-earned money into it. When this project ultimately failed, and at this point it does appear that it has in fact failed, Logan decided to distance himself from the project completely, similar to what he had done after the whole Doink thing. And so enter Steven Findeisen, commonly known as Coffeezilla. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. Anyway, he has his own YouTube channel, which has become a resounding success, particularly in investigating and exposing scams and scammers of all kinds. His biggest claim to fame, although this complaint interestingly does not make any sort of mention of it, was exposing Sam Bankman-Fried and his crypto exchange FTX. After Coffeezilla exposed FTX in a multi-part series, the story picked up steam and it ended up in an international story when FTX ultimately did collapse and millions of dollars went missing. As a result, on November 2nd, 2023, SBF was convicted of 7 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. And on March 28th, 2024, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison and fined $11 billion. Anyway, around the time that all of this was going down, in the end of 2022, beginning 2023, Coffeezilla also came out with a 3-part series about Logan Paul and his Cryptozoo project. Coffeezilla called the first video Logan Paul's biggest scam. And what turned up from the series was a very in-depth and nuanced investigation into what happened with Cryptozoo internally and externally. There was apparently disorganization and failures to pay developers and unqualified people lying on their resumes to get certain jobs within the team. And as it turned out, Logan Paul apparently was not the only dirtbag in the Cryptozoo team. In fact, in the series, it seemed as though every person with fingerprints on Cryptozoo had grubby hands, at least to some degree. The response to Coffeezilla's Cryptozoo series was phenomenal, and Logan Paul saw instant backlash since it appeared he was responsible as the leader of a project that took tens of thousands of dollars from average people per person, really, and then failed those people, leaving them to hold an empty bag. And so Logan Paul did what Logan Paul often does, which is to respond like a complete hothead. He came out with his own videos in response and said that Coffeezilla was a liar, and even insinuated on his own that Coffeezilla was some kind of criminal, and then rounded everything out by threatening to sue Coffeezilla for defamation.
And I'll see you in court.
Part 6 is the more he says and the more he continues to spread this misinformation that this was any sort of con or scam, the more I have for the lawsuit that I am filing. The defamation lawsuit that is fucking happening, because this is wrong. This is fucking wrong.
Given the backlash that he received from even these videos, Logan Paul then backed down by taking down his lawsuit threat videos and instead put out a thank you Coffeezilla video where he apologized to the public for Cryptozoo and thanked Coffeezilla for his investigative work into the project.
Coffeezilla is not a criminal. I called him, I apologized. My initial response to his series was that of fire, an ego flare, whatever it is, pride. I'm a fighter at heart, and I was defensive because I know I never scammed anyone with this project. I never made any money, never sold any tokens, and I only had the best intentions going in. But the fact is that suing Coffeezilla is not going to help Cryptozoo holders, so I do need to focus my attention where it should be, which is on fans and supporters of me. You guys mean the world to me, so I'd like to announce my 3-step plan moving forward. Step 1, Jeff and I are going to burn our Zoo tokens so we have no financial upside in the game, and it will add value to holder tokens. Step 2, we want to offer a rewards program for players who are disappointed in the status of the game. So essentially, you're going to be able to burn your base egg or your base animal for the mint price, which was 0.1 ETH or the equivalent in BNB. I am personally committing 1,000 ETH to this, which is about $1.3 million right now for players who want to get out. And then step 3, obviously finish and deliver the game as outlined in the white paper by completing the egg bridge from ETH to BSC for base animals and base eggs, completing the marketplace, and obviously completing the releasing your animals into the wild to accrue your yield function. To say I am disappointed in how this was handled internally is an understatement. There's a full internal investigation going on along with an audit, and we are going to pursue full legal action for whomever needs to be held accountable. If any money is recovered in the process, it'll go right to the community. My sole obligation is to my supporters, and I know this video is long overdue. Here it is. I'm sorry, guys. I apologize for how this has unfolded thus far, and I want people to know that they can trust me and that I'll always take care of the fans and people who support me. I appreciate your guys' patience while we do our internal investigation, and I promise to be transparent and disclose any information we find out in the process. And lastly, thank you, Coffeezilla. You have catalyzed this, and I am very grateful for your work and your investigation, and I mean that. Thank you, bro.
At that point, it looked like things would maybe end up resolved. Logan Paul did see a bunch of civil lawsuits on behalf of the people who invested in Cryptozoo and ended up entirely screwed by the whole project. But it sounded like Logan was planning to resolve matters one way or another. Then Coffeezilla came out with one video about 6 months later, essentially saying, hey, Logan Paul, when are you going to actually refund all of these people? It's been 6 whole months after all. And last we checked, you sounded like you intended to put this whole thing behind you sooner rather than later.
6 months ago, I investigated Cryptozoo, a scam created by Logan Paul and a team of criminals, and a dude named Jeff, which ultimately resulted in millions of dollars being stolen from fans. I was threatened with a lawsuit for exposing it, but ultimately, Logan Paul decided to thank me instead for his public undressing and announced a $1.8 million refund to the victims. Now, I thought that was a great ending to the story, but I also said this: I'll follow up in the future to make sure that he actually gives that money away, and that's why we're here today. It's been 6 months, so here's a follow-up. Logan Paul has not paid back his victims. He hasn't talked about it since he first announced he was going to pay them back, and what's worst of all, he doesn't seem to have a plan in place to refund anyone. How do I know that? Well, because I've been asking Logan for that plan to refund people the entire time behind the scenes in messages like these. Quote, "Hey Logan, following up on the zoo refunds, when should people expect those? It's been about a month." And then a month later, following up again. People are wondering what's going on. Almost been 2 months. Very frustrating for victims to get promises and then see nothing and get zero communication. And then later, "Hey Logan, following up for a third time, it's been over 5 months since you promised to refund the victims of Cryptozoo over $3 million. I meant to say $1.8 million there. The price of crypto changed a lot, so what this buyback was going to be was constantly changing. I just misspoke there. Either way, my point was this, quote, "You haven't contacted any of them, nor explained why you haven't done what you said you'd do. Meanwhile, you got public credit for promising to do this."
And then 6 months after that, Coffeezilla came out with yet another video calling out Logan about this whole thing yet again.
Logan Paul is refunding people he scammed if they promise to stop suing him for the vastly larger amount he may owe them. And honestly, I'm conflicted because on the one hand, victims getting money is always great. And I'm proud that our investigation led to some real-world consequences. But I can't pretend that things are fixed or fine for people who entrusted me with their story when that's just not true. So here's the real, more complicated story in 3 parts: the refund offer, the zoo tokens, the lawsuit, starting with the most important part. And if you get one thing from this story, this should be it. These are the estimated damages in Cryptozoo, $18.5 million, which comes from a combination of ZooCoin and NFT sales. And then this, much smaller percentage of that pie, is what Logan is actually offering to refund, on the condition, though, that all of the people who spent the last year suing him for the larger damages drop their case. So that's a refund of only 12% to drop 100% of the case that, as far as I can tell, Logan may be losing. Put in that light then, this refund starts to look less like a good faith attempt to make things right and more like a cynical bargaining chip to avoid getting in even more trouble.
And now Logan Paul has just sued Coffeezilla over statements that Coffeezilla made in these last 2 videos that I just mentioned, and for a statement that he made in a June 29th, 2023 tweet where Coffeezilla said, "Logan Paul really is the type of dude to thank you when you expose his scam, then block you when you remind him to pay up." Here's the main crux of Logan Paul's claims in his complaint. Starting when he released a 3-part YouTube series on Cryptozoo in December 2022 and continuing into the present, Findeisen has perpetuated the false narrative that Paul scammed and defrauded his own fans in connection with the project. Findeisen has perpetuated this false narrative despite knowing it to be completely and utterly false in order to enhance his own profile and increase his viewership and income in the process. And indeed, he has done so despite being in possession of and purposely omitting from his series and related statements overwhelming objective evidence that Paul had in reality been enthusiastic about the project and deeply committed to its success, only to be deceived by several of the project's trusted advisors who turned out to be con men. Logan also claims that because he never sold any of his Cryptozoo tokens, that this was further evidence that he never profited from it and that he therefore never scammed anyone. And he also alleges that Coffeezilla also knew this as well. Now, as I said earlier in this video, I came out with my own video back in early 2023 where I said that Logan Paul made some serious legal mistakes in responding to Coffeezilla's series, and that it would be an even worse mistake to sue Coffeezilla for defamation over this whole thing. Now that he's actually sued Coffeezilla for defamation and I've looked at the complaint, I will say that I've refined my thoughts a little bit on that, but ultimately I have the same conclusion that this was a terrible idea. But to explain why I think this was a terrible idea, let's first talk about what exactly is defamation. What does Logan Paul need to prove here? So you probably have a basic idea of what defamation is. It's when someone lies about someone else and in so doing causes reputational harm to that other person. And when we're talking about public figures like Logan Paul, there are 5 basic elements to a defamation claim. Here's what a plaintiff like Logan Paul needs to show in order to succeed on this claim. First, he has to show that Coffeezilla made a false statement. Second, he has to show that that statement was about Logan Paul. Third, he has to show that Coffeezilla made that false statement to at least one other person. Fourth, he has to show that Coffeezilla made that statement with actual malice. And finally, Logan Paul has to show that his reputation was actually harmed as a result of this statement. Now, in just a little bit, we will get into the specifics of what Logan exactly alleges that Coffeezilla said was defamatory. But first, I'll say that generally, of these 5 elements, I don't think that anyone is going to argue about element number 3. These were statements made on social media, so they were definitely sufficiently public. And at the same time, I don't think that anyone's going to argue about whether these statements statements are about Logan Paul. So that eliminates any sort of argument over element number 2. But if any of these statements at issue here are found to be opinion statements, then that impacts Logan's ability to prove element number 1. And I will say, just calling someone a scammer on its own isn't really enough, factually speaking, to win a defamation claim. All of these statements are going to be taken in the total context that the listener will have taken it in and understood it. So the mere fact that Coffeezilla may have called something a scam or may have called someone a scammer isn't necessarily on its own enough. Also, jumping into element number 5, Logan has to prove reputational harm. And just right out of the gate in this case, this is going to be one of the biggest uphill climbs for Logan because his reputation has been terrible for years. As I mentioned before, there was the whole Japan forest video incident, and there was also the Dink Doink incident as well. And in fact, in what seems to be an attempt to weaken his own case, he even referenced the Japan incident in the complaint as something where he had harmed his own reputation in the past. Like, if you're going to put forward a case where you're saying this guy lied about me to the public and now my reputation is irreparably harmed because of this, I don't see how talking about how your reputation was awful before this point is helpful. Now, he does say in the complaint that he recovered his reputation in the years that followed and that he learned this whole lesson from it. But I think that there are plenty of people out there who would say that the entire Japan forest video incident was a controversy that was essentially irredeemable, and largely because there hasn't seemed to be all that much of a behavioral or an attitude shift in Logan since then. He's still kind of a punk who comes across as incredibly entitled and uncaring about the struggles of other people, particularly the people who are more unfortunate than him. And the same is true with the whole Dink Doink situation. His reputation with regard to specifically crypto projects already wasn't great thanks to his involvement in Dink Doink. And to make things even worse for Logan Paul, he's got to prove that alleged reputational harm somehow. And the way to do that in America typically is by showing that your income has been hit. Now, I admit I have not been paying all that much attention to Logan Paul's output in terms of his content or his projects or his income for that matter, but I do know that he's done some boxing matches following his brother Jake's lead, and I think he's been pretty successful as a WWE performer, where, by the way, he's been very actively trading in on his persona as a villain.
Logan, friend, look, you're not from our world, so let me just explain to you how things work around here.
Nothing impulsive about that.
How do the things work around here, Sammy? I'd like to know.
So if someone can explain to me where Logan Paul was actually harmed by any of this financially, let me know, because I personally don't see it. Okay, so now with all of that said, I still have to explain element number 4, which is the hardest element to prove in any defamation case brought by a public figure. And that is where Logan Paul needs to prove that Coffeezilla made the false statements with actual malice. So what is actual malice? This is a very, very difficult standard for a plaintiff to meet, in part because it's all about the defendant's state of mind. This is where the plaintiff has to show that the defendant made the statement not just negligently. Rather, the plaintiff has to show with clear and convincing evidence that the defendant made the statement either knowing it was false or with reckless disregard as to the truth or falsity of the statement. So how do we define recklessness here? Recklessness is basically where the defendant was aware of facts that give a different story, and that there's evidence showing that they basically didn't care about whether they were right or wrong with what they were saying. To show this, a plaintiff could introduce evidence that the defendant knew that they were relying on information sources that were actually completely unreliable. Or the plaintiff might introduce evidence showing that the person had an ulterior motive for publishing the statement. And I will say, Logan does make a claim in the complaint that suggests that Coffeezilla has an ulterior motive to defame Logan. This is basically where Logan says that Coffeezilla figured out at some point that he could generate a lot of clicks for his YouTube channel by merging the topic of scams and social media influencers, and that this was really Coffeezilla's rise to notoriety on YouTube. But the problem is it's not exactly accurate, historically speaking, at least not from what I can remember. Like, sorry, Logan, but Coffeezilla's breakout on YouTube really actually had nothing to do with you, at least as far as I can remember. As I mentioned earlier in this video, Coffeezilla's true rise to fame came from his series on Sam Bankman-Fried and the fraud that led to the collapse of FTX. And this, at the very least, coincided with the actual criminal investigation, charges, and ultimate conviction of SBF, who's now actually sitting in jail for his crypto fraud scheme. And so I do find it really interesting that Logan omitted this important piece of Coffeezilla's background here because it is relevant. Now, on the one hand, including this bit of information in Logan Paul's narrative actually could have potentially served to strengthen his damages argument in the lawsuit. In other words, he could say, look, at this time, all eyes were on Coffeezilla's investigative work since his SBF videos turned out to be shockingly 100% correct. And so he was on an absolute tear with those videos. And therefore, the public was primed at that time to look at anything that Coffeezilla put out there as completely true. They were just going to eat it all up, regardless of whether it was true or not. But I think that the main strategic reason why Logan didn't go down this route is because including the information about Coffeezilla's videos about SBF and FTX and Coffeezilla's role in making that story known undercuts Logan's actual malice argument, particularly when it comes to potential recklessness argument. Remember, one way of putting on evidence of recklessness is to introduce evidence that Coffeezilla had an ulterior motive for publishing false statements about Logan Paul. And in this complaint, Logan Paul points to Coffeezilla's rise in notoriety on YouTube as someone calling out supposed scams. And more specifically, Logan claims that Coffeezilla reached a shrewd conclusion that his audience had a keen interest in the merger between alleged crypto scams or alleged scams and social media influencers. So in other words, Logan Paul is essentially saying here that Coffeezilla had this ulterior motive to lie about Logan Paul because he needed this kind of content to break out on YouTube. And hence, Logan Paul is saying about Coffeezilla was reckless as to the truth or falsity of his statements. But that narrative gets disrupted when you actually look at the content on Coffeezilla's channel at the time, and especially when you pair that with the actual mainstream media stories going on at the time, which actually were major global stories, especially since the victims of the FTX collapse were international. So again, Logan Paul has an issue here with actual malice because this is just evidence that Coffeezilla didn't really need Logan Paul for content, and he certainly didn't need to lie about Logan Paul to get attention for his channel. But that said, Logan does have one argument here in his complaint to try to overcome this actual malice standard, and it really is the only play he has. And what I'm talking about here is his claim that Coffeezilla selectively used group text to make it look like Logan Paul had this intent to scam when he actually didn't. And so in the complaint, Logan reveals a bunch of group text showing how Logan Paul expressed how he had no idea how any of his tech gobbledygook even worked, but he was really enthusiastic and excited about it. And so by doing this, what he's trying to show is that these text messages reveal that he obviously had no intent to scam the public out of their money, and that this can be easily objectively seen by anyone. Instead, he says that these text messages obviously show that he didn't even care about the profits, he just wanted to build a really great game for people to enjoy. However, there are a few issues here with Logan's claims on this. Number one, he alleges that Coffeezilla had access to all of these group texts since he showed in his original series that he had received access to some group texts. And so Logan is saying if he had access to all of them, then he selectively used the ones that looked bad for Logan and took these out of context when the context would have shown that Logan had the best intentions for the public. However, although Coffeezilla showed in his series that he had seen some group texts and that these appeared to be pretty damaging texts, we don't know that Coffeezilla has seen all of the group texts that existed between Logan Paul and his team during the development of Cryptozoo. Coffeezilla obviously got access to what he was allowed to get access to by someone from the team. And it could very well be that what he got was, in fact, a limited number of texts that were already cut out of context, assuming that the context was, in fact, cut out from these texts in the first place. If that's the case, Logan Paul's actual malice argument is completely shot, and there's absolutely no way that he wins this lawsuit. And I will say, from my vantage point, yeah, okay, maybe Coffeezilla did have some text messages that he decided to set aside. That is entirely possible. However, I am personally a little skeptical that he would have been given access to all of the group texts in the entire history of Cryptozoo's development. It's not like he's able to get a cell phone extraction like what's possible during a lawsuit, and which would be able to give him the complete texting thread histories, potentially at least, and all kinds of metadata to back that information up. But even if Coffeezilla did have access to these so-called contextual text messages, after reading them in the complaint myself, none of them really seem to be like smoking guns in Logan's favor. In fact, most of these still can be interpreted through the lens that Logan maybe doesn't understand how the tech works, but that he's super excited to make a bunch of money off of the average Joe. And that excitement could be ethical or it could be unethical. And look, courts are not going to look at these texts and say that Coffeezilla was somehow required to adopt Logan Paul's interpretation of these texts before proceeding with some kind of a statement on this whole thing. Rather, courts are going to look at these and say, what is a reasonable interpretation? Remember, Logan Paul has to show actual malice with clear and convincing evidence. This means that if Coffeezilla can point to even these context group texts and say a reasonable interpretation is that he's just excited about making money off of the general public, then Logan's not going to be able to win this thing with that. However, I will say there are like 1 or 2 text messages here that are Logan's strongest texts. And so in the interest of transparency and balance to Logan, I want to mention them here. For example, he points in his complaint to a series of texts between Logan and Ibanez, one of the Cryptozoo team members. Ibanez apparently told Logan that the market cap of the Zoo token had reached $100 million on August 16th, 2021. And Logan's response apparently was, bro, who cares? Honestly, F all that. I hope people find the stupid satisfaction we find with hatching their hybrids. F the token. F everything. I want something to laugh out loud about this. I will say, this can definitely be interpreted as Logan saying, I don't care how much money we make, I care about making a fun product that people will enjoy. But the question is that the only reasonable interpretation that can be made from this? Personally, I think that there is another reasonable interpretation, which would be that he's reckless about the actual outcome of the product and of what's to result from the investments made by the public into the product. Like, this could also be interpreted as, I'm just a rich kid who wanted to have a laugh and not take any of this seriously. And all of that could also be in line with all of this essentially being a scam. So I don't know if you find that to be a compelling interpretation. Either way, let me know in the comments down below. My point is, none of these text messages that were revealed feel like they are a complete slam dunk to me to overcome this actual malice standard. Okay, but to really give this the analysis that this topic deserves, we have to look at the specific allegedly defamatory statements that Logan says that Coffeezilla made. Specifically, Logan Paul says that there are 3 statements, or I guess kind of clusters of statements, that Coffeezilla made that are allegedly defamatory. We'll go through each of them one by one, but first I want to say that when I read the complaint and the actual statements that Logan Paul is alleging are defamatory, I was actually really surprised. I thought that these statements were going to be from Coffeezilla's initial 3-part series on Cryptozoo, since that's what blew the lid open on this whole topic. Instead, Logan decided to sue on these 3 statements, or I guess clusters of statements, that are from June 29th, 2023, June 30th, 2023, and January 4th, 2024. These are all way after people had been talking about Cryptozoo being an alleged scam for quite a long time. I mean, Coffeezilla's original series on the topic came out in like December 2022 or like January 2023. And so this is a problem for Logan Paul for a number of reasons. First, keep in mind that one thing that Logan needs to prove is that the statements highlighted in this lawsuit caused Logan Paul reputational harm. I mentioned this before, but it bears repeating here. There has to be a causal nexus between specifically these statements alleged in this complaint and his reputation being in the tank. With that, there needs to be a distinct, basically before and after effect that these particular statements had. So if his reputation was already crap before Coffeezilla made these particular statements, he won't be able to meet the element of damages. And that's a material element for defamation. And to me, it does seem pretty obvious that the public formulated their opinions of Logan on the subject of Cryptozoo through the original 3-part series, not these random follow-up videos that were like 6 months to a year later. So already, even before looking at the specific statements and just the timing of these statements, Logan has a big problem here with proving causation for reputational harm. And the second problem that this brings up for Logan is that the statements at issue in this complaint were also made long after Logan Paul put out his Thank You Coffeezilla video, where he apologized to the public over Cryptozoo and thanked Coffeezilla for investigating it and highlighting the issues that were present behind the scenes there. This video statement by Logan Paul can be reasonably interpreted as an admission that Coffeezilla was actually correct when he called Cryptozoo a scam in that original series. is. After all, in the video, Logan doesn't fight over whether the word scam is accurate or should be used. And so this can 100% be interpreted as an implicit admission that it's actually accurate to call it a scam, or at the very least that he has no problem with it. And something to know about defamation cases is that truth is always an ultimate defense. If there is tacit acknowledgement by the plaintiff to the public before these alleged statements at issue in this lawsuit were made, this can be a significant barrier for Logan Paul's attempt to prove this case. Okay. Anyway, with all of that said, let's look at the first statement at issue here. The first was this one statement that Coffeezilla made on Twitter on June 29th, 2023. Here he said, Logan Paul really is the type of dude to thank you when you expose his scam, then block you when you remind him to pay up. So it seems that the issues that Logan Paul has with this particular statement are twofold. We've got Coffeezilla calling Cryptozoo a scam, and then we've got Coffeezilla asserting that Logan has ownership over the scam. It's not just a scam, it's his scam. Now, for this, it would be helpful to define the word scam. And basically, it's a dishonest scheme for purposes of taking money from other people. This is very closely associated with the word fraud. And now, one thing that Logan Paul does assert is that the Cryptozoo project was not a scam. And at the beginning of 2023, he promised that he was going to finish the product. And he says he had a real, genuine interest in making this a reality. But keep in mind, selling a product before it exists can still land you in trouble for fraud. After all, there is the well-known case of biotechnology entrepreneur Elizabeth Holmes and her blood testing company Theranos. Theranos was supposed to be this revolutionary biotech company that would change the face of blood testing by developing methods that would only need a tiny amount of blood. But on January 3rd, 2022, she was found guilty of 4 counts of defrauding investors when Theranos proved to be basically a sham company that was never going to get off the ground. This whole case kind of introduced this question, which was, at what point does an ambitious and uncertain entrepreneurial gamble cross the line from your typical startup that everyone knows has the possibility of failing precisely because it is both ambitious and revolutionary? When does that cross the line to straight up fraud? And if you look to Elizabeth Holmes' case for guidance on that, it'll tell you that it's probably when you as a CEO knew or should have known that your product is worthless and you continue to market it nonetheless. So to bring it back to this first statement and this complaint that is at issue, is Cryptozoo a scam? I think honestly, especially the way in which this is being alleged and in the way that it was being used by Coffeezilla in this particular statement, I think it's a matter of opinion, especially if you actually watched Coffeezilla's initial series on Cryptozoo, where he actually ended up delivering a very nuanced view of who he thought was and was not at fault, or was, I guess, at most at fault. This nuance, by the way, is even referenced in the complaint, which again, I would argue isn't helpful to Logan here. And the thing is, if this is a statement of opinion, it's not something that is subject to a defamation claim. A statement of opinion is not the same thing as a statement of fact, and only factual statements can give rise to a defamation claim. Now, what about this other part? The part where Coffeezilla indicates that Logan has ownership over the scam, the his scam part. Well, again, this is where reasonable interpretations can 100% favor Coffeezilla. After all, Cryptozoo was Logan Paul's project. He marketed it as his, he was the one who really spearheaded it, and even if he didn't understand the details of the tech behind it, it was his project. It's like any other tech entrepreneur that doesn't necessarily know how to code the project, but has a vision for where they want to go with it. That is someone who is still going to be responsible for the project. And so if Cryptozoo turned out to be a scam, it's reasonable to call it Logan Paul's scam. So already this first statement here is pretty weak in terms of the argument for the defamation by Logan Paul's side. Okay, so what about the second statement at issue here? The second statement that Logan says is defamatory is basically Coffeezilla's entire June 30th, 2023 video titled Logan Paul's Scam Isn't Over. Logan here says that not only is the title defamatory, but so is the line in the video where Coffeezilla calls Cryptozoo a scam created by Logan Paul. I will say that so far, I think everything that I said in my analysis of the first statement at issue in this lawsuit applies here too. And Logan also says, find eyes Horizon left no doubt that he was accusing Paul of intentionally defrauding individuals who bought egg NFTs or zoo tokens by referring to those people as Logan Paul's victims, declaring to his audience that Paul was guilty, and his offer to reimburse buyers of egg NFTs was an admission of guilt, and stating that Paul was just pretending he'd changed. And so here we really have to break this bit apart. First, there's a reference to people who bought egg NFTs and zoo tokens as Logan Paul's quote-unquote victims. Regardless of whether it was a scam, there were people who lost money investing in this project. And there could be a number of bases for a civil lawsuit to result from that. And in fact, there have been multiple bases for civil lawsuits to result from it. And any one of these bases can give people the reason to call themselves victims, or for other people to call them victims. So again, this claim is total weak sauce as to this particular statement. But then there's also this last part of this allegation. And here, I think it also mischaracterizes what Coffeezilla actually said about Logan Paul being guilty or making a guilty admission in the video statement. In the video, Coffeezilla was referencing the same video that I talked about where Logan thanked Coffeezilla for his Cryptozoo investigation. And remember, I said that a reasonable interpretation of Logan's statement there was that he was admitting to Cryptozoo being in fact a scam. And even aside from that, this complaint says that Coffeezilla declared that Logan was guilty and that he had made an admission of guilt. But that's not really accurate. Here's what Coffeezilla actually said in the video.
Prevented from explaining himself, and he's certainly not legally prevented from giving people their money back. Even if you want to argue the point that maybe Logan might look more guilty if he promises to pay victims, well, sure, but he already did that though. He said he felt so bad that he was going to refund $1.8 million to the affected people who invested. But actually delivering that promise doesn't add any layer of admission to that guilt. He already said he was responsible. At this point, refunding people is just doing what he said he was going to do from the beginning. No, I think the real reason Logan hasn't paid, if I had to guess, it's just because either he does not want to pay, he cannot be bothered to pay on time, or he's just stalling, all of which are unacceptable. Because let me remind you of his promise. Quote, I have committed more than $1.8 million for those who do not want to wait for Cryptozoo to be completed.
So to me, this is not a factual declaration like what Logan would have the reader of this complaint think, and therefore it's not suitable to give rise to a defamation claim. Okay, so in my opinion, the first and second statements at issue are crap, but what about the third one? The third statement that Logan Paul says is defamatory is basically all of Coffeezilla's January 5th, 2024 video titled Logan Paul's quote-unquote refund. Here's what Logan Paul has to say about this video. In the video, Find Eisen accused Paul of orchestrating a massive con, referred to Paul as a serial scammer, and referred to those who bought zoo tokens or Cryptozoo egg NFTs as the people Logan Paul scammed. Okay, so everything that I said here in the first statement in my analysis as to whether or not Cryptozoo is a scam, or whether or not, you can say that Logan Paul had ownership over it, all of that applies here as well. And for the rest, let's just play the statements from the videos as they were here. First, there's a part where Coffeezilla uses the term massive con. Let's look at it in context. Coffeezilla first expresses in the video that it's been a whole year since Logan Paul promised to finish Cryptozoo, and he's highlighting that there's no indication that Logan Paul actually is ever going to finish it.
To make it right, we all get that. But I watched for 3 years as Logan's fans, and that's what these investors were. They were fans of Logan Paul. They spent 3 years begging this guy to make this game, and the entire time, he told them he was working on it. And I thought, even at my most pessimistic, that Logan would at least crap out some abomination that he described as a game that limped past our lowest collective expectations. But I was wrong. I mean, I wasn't wrong the first time he said I was wrong when he said he was going to still finish the game. I was wrong that he was going to do it at all.
But even after 12 months of work, you've still managed to overlook one crucial piece of information. See, even though I've said it's coming so many times, you've assumed that Cryptozoo isn't being made. Who are you to decide when the development timeline ends? Trust me, Cryptozoo is coming. I will make damn sure of it.
Oops, so much for making damn sure of it, because there's no game. This is what makes this such a massive con. This guy sold millions in NFTs, tens of millions of Zoo tokens, and he's not even going to release the thing he promised this whole time. This is why it's such a slap in the face. These investors spent 3 years waiting for a game. Not only that, 2 years waiting for an update, which he never gave, and then a year suing him. And after all of that, all he offers is a 12% refund, no game, 30 days to accept.
So he does use the phrase massive con, but again, this appears to be an opinion, and he explains why he has that opinion. And that explanation is entirely reasonable. It's because Logan was adamant that he'd be finishing the project and that he seemed to have yet again abandoned that project when people started asking questions again. It's like, where is the lie here? And remember, truth is an ultimate defense to defamation. If there's no lie here, there's no defamation. Okay, so but what about the part where Coffeezilla calls Logan a serial scammer in this video?
100% within Logan Paul's power as a near billionaire with Prime to make things right, fully right, with his fans who he scammed. And if he gave a full refund, we would all celebrate. Me foremost. But will he? Or will he try to dodge responsibility, cheap out, rip his fans off, and avoid accountability? I think it's the latter. So, those are the 3 main points. You're all caught up. To recap, part 1, refunds. They're being used as a bargaining chip to drop a lawsuit, and so he never has to produce this game, which has been promised for 3 years, and he's sold tens of millions of dollars for. Part 2 is the Zoo tokens. He's pretending they're not for a game that they definitely were for to avoid refunding people, when in fact he admits they were created to support the game. Part 3 is the lawsuit, where he stole my investigation, tried to pass it off as his own, but just cuts out the part where he did everything wrong, and leaves out the entire year where he was solely in charge of the project. No bad actors. He could have fixed everything, but he didn't, because he's cheap and doesn't want to pay anybody. Anyway, I hope that catches you up with what's been going on, and I hope we as a community can have the nuance and complexity to hold in our minds 2 things at the same time as true. 1, it's always good if victims get any money back, and we should celebrate that. However, number 2 is that doesn't mean we can't fight for 100% of what they deserve. And Logan Paul is not a hero for doing this or making things right. He's a serial scammer who's offering a minority refund as a last-ditch effort to save his wallet and his reputation.
This is the conclusion of Coffeezilla's video and the conclusion of basically the entire series that he made on Cryptozoo at this point. In the process, he's gone over the lie after lie after lie that Logan Paul has apparently made just in reference to Cryptozoo, which Coffeezilla has caught him in. And so is it reasonable to conclude that Logan Paul is a serial scammer when he's been caught in a series of lies and has refused to take true material ownership of Cryptozoo? I certainly think so, but that is my opinion. And again, this does seem to be an opinion statement, but maybe you see it differently. Let me know in the comments down below. But before I close out this very, very long video that probably is just way too long and detailed, I want to touch on the biggest reason why I think this whole lawsuit is a terrible idea. And this has to do with what I like to refer to as the magic of discovery. You see, this lawsuit is probably not a winning lawsuit for Logan, but this may be enough for him to be able to get through the pleading stage of the lawsuit and into the discovery phase. And discovery is where both sides can demand all kinds of information related to what they need to argue in their case. For Logan, there would be an interest in getting information connected to what Coffeezilla knew about these group texts, for example, at the time that he was making these video series. Did Coffeezilla actually disregard some texts that were sent by Logan in the group chat that had indicated that he had every intention of actually completing this project? That's an example of what Logan would want from Coffeezilla during this discovery phase. But on the other hand, Coffeezilla also would be in a position to ask for all kinds of evidence from Logan. This includes any kind of information that would tend to prove or disprove the truth or falsity as to whether or not Cryptozoo was in fact a scam. And this is because naturally Coffeezilla would be able to assert the defense that it is in fact true that Cryptozoo was a scam and that Logan never cared about actually delivering a product to the public after taking their money to fund it. It also means that Coffeezilla would be able to probe some other information that Logan has put squarely at issue in this case. I'm talking specifically about this claim that Logan has made that he's never cashed in any of his tokens from Cryptozoo. From Coffeezilla's initial videos, he said that he looked into it and agreed that Logan probably didn't cash those in. However, what if Coffeezilla was actually wrong about this? What if he just didn't have enough information to find the transactions for Logan Paul to have actually sold those tokens or transferred them for something else. And at the same time as I say this, there is a arguable through line between Logan's involvement in both Cryptozoo and in Dink Doink just before it. And it gives rise to the sneaking suspicion that Logan could have learned a thing or two about making money from cryptocurrency offerings to the public after Dink Doink, which he could have applied to the Cryptozoo situation shortly thereafter. This became apparent to me when I came across a Time magazine article about Logan Paul and the destruction of his crypto empire. One thing that caught my notice was that this article also talks about the shadiness of Dink Doink and the connection that it may have to Cryptozoo. This suggests something very interesting. If Coffeezilla decides to dig into discovery here, he can hunt for information related to both Cryptozoo and Dink Doink under the auspices of the truth defense that Logan Paul actually did in fact engage in a scam, so therefore it's not defamatory to call it a scam, and then to argue that he learned how to do all of this right after the whole Dink Doink experience. After all, the article does point out that although Logan never disclosed to the public when he started vigorously marketing the project, Dink Doink specifically, he did later admit to the New York Times that he actually helped create the project. And one interesting thing to point out is that after both of these endeavors failed, one of Logan's big arguments for why he says that he didn't screw people over in the process was that he never sold his coins. And the thing is, Time looked into this as to Dink Doink. And while they said that they never found anything conclusive, there definitely was enough to suggest that Logan may have sneakily made a few transactions to hide transfers of these meme coin tokens. And what's more, their investigator did find some interesting evidence that suggests that there was a wallet that did in fact make some shady transfers of Dink Doink, suggesting a cash out. And that the same wallet also received Cryptozoo tokens well before the project was publicly launched. So this in turn suggests that this particular wallet was involved in both Dink Doink and Cryptozoo behind the scenes. And note, neither Logan nor his representatives have responded positively to requests for comment on Dink Doink. But now Logan has put this topic squarely at issue by alleging in support of his argument that he never sold any of these coins. So while Time magazine may have had limited access to Logan's wallet information, he may have just created an opportunity for Coffeezilla to have greater access to dig even deeper for that information than any journalist could have. But those are my thoughts. What do you think? Is there more for Coffeezilla to worry here about this defamation lawsuit? Is there something that I'm missing in my analysis? Or does this whole thing just feel like a massive waste of resources that could be better served actually resolving this issue with the people who lost thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars of their hard-earned money by investing in Cryptozoo? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this or at least found it interesting or informative. And if you did, I would love it if you could hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're new here and you want to see more coverage of crazy cases and interesting legal topics, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is out. And if you're really loving the content and you want to know how to best support the channel and get perks like early access to videos like this one, consider becoming a member of Fight Club. You can join either through YouTube memberships or by becoming a supporter on Patreon. Links to both are in the description below. Otherwise, see you in the next video.